Imagine standing in a garage that is just filled with $1 million worth of pristine Ferrari parts.
Okay, I can picture that.
Right. So you have absolutely everything you need to build the fastest car in the world. You've got the gleaming exhaust pipes, the flawless engine blocks.
The hand-stitched leather seats, right?
Exactly.
Right.
But then when you finally get the car assembled and pull onto the highway, you realize you have absolutely no idea how to drive a manual transmission.
Oh, man, yeah, that's a problem.
Right. The parts are all perfect, but the engine just stalls out the literal second you try to put it in gear.
And that right there is the ultimate bottleneck. It's actually exactly what happens in the brain of an advanced English learner during a real-world conversation.
Which is exactly why today we are going on a deep dive into some really fascinating excerpts from a discussion titled Rewiring the Brain for Advanced English Fluency.
It's such a great topic.
It really is, because if you are listening to this, you likely already have that garage full of parts, You
have the C2 level vocabulary.
Exactly. You know all the intricate grammar rules. But our mission today is to figure out how to bridge that incredibly frustrating gap between passively knowing all of that complex English and actually speaking it actively.
Right, doing it spontaneously.
Yes, without that agonizing, debilitating pause where your brain just seems to freeze up completely.
And, that pause is so universal. And looking at the source material, the components, like the vocabulary and the grammar, they're clearly not the problem.
The inventory is full.
Right. The inventory is full. The issue lies entirely in the cognitive assembly line and the delivery mechanism itself. The text actually identifies this phenomenon as a classic case of cognitive overload or an analysis paralysis.
Analysis paralysis.
Right.
Which is exactly what it feels like when you're put on the spot.
Yeah.
But what is physically happening in the brain during that, that 3-second pause that makes it feel so impossible to just get the words out?
Well, it really comes down to the strict limitations of our working memory. The prefrontal cortex can only hold and process a very small number of variables at any given time. So mid-conversation, the learner's brain enters this frantic filtering process.
Like searching through a massive database.
Exactly. The text highlights the exact internal monologue that triggers this overload. It's stuff like, is this the most precise term? Is the syntax impeccable? Should I employ the subjunctive mood here?
Oh, wow. Yeah, when you throw something like the subjunctive mood into the mix while simultaneously trying to maintain eye contact and read the other person's body language.
It's too much.
Yeah, the brain's processing speed just hits a brick wall.
Because computing syntax from scratch requires an immense amount of cognitive RAM. And here is the core issue with that. While this really intense internal computation is happening, the conversation in the real world has already moved on.
The window to speak has closed.
Right. And this leaves the speaker feeling perpetually left behind and linguistically insecure, despite actually knowing the language inside and out.
Wait, hold on. Let me unpack this for a second, because it feels completely counterintuitive to traditional education.
Oh, so?
Well, so you're telling me that studying harder, striving to be more grammatically correct, and searching for the absolute perfect word actually degrades your ability to speak in the moment.
According to the text, yes, absolutely.
That is wild.
It is, but it stems from a fundamental misconception that fluency requires perfection from the outset. Many learners treat spoken language like a written exam, where every sentence has to be ruthlessly edited before it's finally submitted to the listener.
Right.
But true linguistic fluency isn't born from a place of flawless premeditation.
It actually makes me think of playing a fast-paced platformer video game.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So if you're running through a level and you encounter a gap, you really just need to press the jump button.
Just jump.
Right. But if you suddenly freeze and try to calculate the exact optimal button combination to execute a flawless triple backflip jump,
you're going to overthink the mechanics.
Exactly. You miss the timing completely and you fall straight into the lava.
That analogy tracks perfectly with the neurology of skill acquisition, actually.
Yeah.
By trying to execute the flawless combo, you sacrifice the single most important element of communication, which is momentum.
Momentum?
Yeah. The source material states that true fluency is forged in messy, imperfect, and iterative practice.
Messy and imperfect.
Right. The ultimate goal isn't to articulate the perfect sentence. The goal is just to maintain conversational momentum.
Just keep moving. Don't fall in the lava.
Exactly.
But, okay, if perfectionism is freezing the system and our working memory is crashing because we're trying to build these flawless sentences from scratch while the clock is ticking, how do we actually change the building blocks we use? Like, how do we bypass that mental bottleneck?
Well, this brings us to what the text calls L1 interference.
Oh, L1 interference. That's the deeply ingrained habit of thinking in your native language first, right?
Right, thinking in your native tongue and then rapidly trying to translate those thoughts into English.
Which takes forever.
It does. The text describes this L1 interference as a mental scaffolding. When you first learn a language, you really need that scaffolding to construct basic meaning.
Sure, you have to start somewhere.
But to expedite fluency, you have to tear it down.
Yeah.
You simply cannot translate your way to spontaneous fluency. The neural pathways involved in passing information from the native language center through that translation filter and then into the second language center, they're just too long and too slow.
Okay, so if translating word by word is too slow, what is the alternative mechanism? What are we supposed to do?
The source suggests moving entirely away from memorizing single, isolated words and instead internalizing what they call lexical chunks.
Lexical chunks.
Yeah, they are prefabricated multi-word phrases or collocations. So instead of storing and retrieving individual words one by one, your brain stores the entire phrase as a single unbreakable unit.
Oh, okay. Do they give examples?
They do, and they're highly applicable ones. Phrases like, that's a valid point, or I'm inclined to agree.
Oh, I see. Or things like, let's unpack that further. Or on the flip side.
Exactly. By learning those phrases as single units, you completely bypass the need to construct the sentence from scratch.
Because the grammar is already baked in.
Right. You aren't frantically searching for the subject, then conjugating the verb, then trying to find the correct preposition. You retrieve the whole chunk in one smooth neurological motion.
It's kind of like the difference between building a castle wall with single stud Lego bricks versus just snapping on a massive pre-built wall section.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, if I'm building brick by brick, that's translating single words. It takes forever. But if I just reach into the bin, grab a prefabricated wall, and snap it into place, half the castle is done in one move.
And returning to our earlier point about working memory, that pre-built Lego wall acts as a single data point in your brain rather than 10 separate data points.
Oh, wow.
It drastically reduces your cognitive load.
Okay, I understand the efficiency argument. I really do.
Yeah.
But I have to push back here a little bit.
Go for it.
If I'm just relying on a mental bin full of prefabricated phrases that someone else built, won't I just sound like a robot?
A robot.
Yeah. I mean, doesn't relying on these chunks kill natural expression and make me sound like I'm just reading from a customer service script?
You know, you'd think so, but you are actually underestimating how much of natural native speech is already heavily formulaic.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Native speakers use lexical chunks for a massive percentage of their daily dialogue. The text actually argues the exact opposite of the robot theory.
Okay, how so?
Think of these lexical chunks as a set of high-quality, ready-to-use tools. If you don't have to forge a brand new hammer every single time you want to drive a nail, what happens to all that saved energy?
Oh, I see. You have more energy to focus on what you're actually building.
Precisely. By automating the basic structural frame of a sentence, your brain suddenly has surplus RAM.
That makes total sense.
You are no longer bogged down by syntax, which means you can direct all of that cognitive power toward the unique, nuanced, complex ideas you actually want to express. You can focus on reading the room, adjusting your tone, and, infusing the sentence with your actual personality.
Wow.
Automation doesn't kill creativity. It is literally the prerequisite for it.
So you automate the boring structural stuff to make room for the actual message. That makes a lot of sense. But here's the next logistical hurdle I'm seeing.
Okay.
Let's say you've loaded your mental toolbox with these ready-to-use lexical chunks. You have the pre-built Lego walls in your head.
Right.
Knowing the words mentally doesn't necessarily mean your tongue knows how to move physically. Like reading, I'm inclined to agree on a page is entirely different from delivering it naturally in a fast-paced debate.
And this is exactly where the source transitions from cognitive theory to physical execution, specifically through a technique called phonetic mirroring.
Phonetic mirroring.
Yes, it's a form of advanced shadowing designed specifically for the C2 level.
Shadowing, which usually that just means repeating an audio track out loud, right?
It does, but the text stresses that at an advanced level, it goes far beyond simple mimicry. It is not just about repeating the words, it's about mirroring the entire prosodic contour of a native speaker.
Prosodic contour. Okay, let's break down what that actually means in practice.
So, It encompasses several layers of auditory information. It's the rhythm of the speech. It's the stress patterns, like which syllables hit harder than others and which ones are kind of swallowed.
Okay.
It's the intonation, meaning the rising and falling pitch. And crucially, it includes the subtle emotional undertones.
The emotion.
Right. The method involved taking a short clip of clear, articulate speech and attempting to replicate the actual music of the language.
The music. You know, it sounds a lot like lip syncing in the mirror to your favorite song.
Yes, exactly like that.
Because if you're lip syncing to an intense rock anthem, you don't just stand there stiffly and mouth the lyrics. You try to capture the exact breath, the swagger, the attitude, the emotional vibe of the singer.
Yeah.
You are physically trying to embody the entire performance.
And to take that lip syncing analogy a step further,
Yeah.
think about what is happening biologically when you do that.
Okay.
It's an active physical embodiment that trains your articulatory muscles, your jaw, your tongue, your vocal cords. You are building muscle memory so that your articulatory loop and your auditory processing operate in perfect sync.
Let me challenge one specific part of this, though.
Sure.
You mentioned mirroring the emotional undertones. Is it really necessary to copy the emotion?
Yeah.
But let's say I just want to sound fluent and competent in a Tuesday morning business meeting with stakeholders. Can't I just lock down the rhythm and the pronunciation and just leave the emotion out of it? I mean, I really don't need rock anthem swagger for a Q3 earnings report.
Well, it's a very common assumption that business English is devoid of emotion. But if we look at the actual mechanics of fluency, emotion is the biological engine of memory and rhythm.
Really?
The source is very explicit about this. You are attempting to replicate the music of the language. And what drives music? Emotion.
So you literally can't separate the two.
No, you can't. Because even in a dry corporate business meeting, a native speaker uses subtle emotional shifts to signal importance or to express doubt or to show agreement. Emotion is what physically dictates the rhythm and the stress patterns of a sentence.
Wow. Okay.
When you attach emotion to a lexical chunk, you actually light up the amygdala in the brain, which tags that specific chunk as important for the hippocampus to store.
That's fascinating.
You aren't just memorizing sound, you are chemically binding that phrase to a feeling, making it instantly retrievable the next time you experience that feeling. If you strip the emotion away, the rhythm falls flat and the memory just doesn't stick. Capturing that subtle emotional music is what truly bridges the gap between passive listening and active speaking.
So the emotion is the manual transmission. It's what actually allows you to put the car in gear and move forward.
Exactly. That's a perfect tie back.
Okay, so mirroring a native speaker is incredibly effective when you have a video or a podcast to copy. You have a guide track to follow.
Right.
But real life doesn't come with a guide track. When you're out in the world, how do you train your brain to generate its own spontaneous music and momentum when you are entirely alone?
And this is where the source introduces a really fascinating metacognitive strategy to completely bypass that L1 translation habit we discussed earlier.
Okay.
The ultimate way to tear down that mental scaffolding is to cultivate a relentless internal English monologue.
Thinking in English, which is, always positioned as the holy grail for learners, but it feels incredibly abstract. How do you actually force your brain to do that on command?
The key, according to the text, is to start exceptionally small. You don't try to debate philosophy or solve complex geopolitical issues in your head.
Right, that would be overwhelming.
You start by narrating your immediate physical reality.
Give me an example of narrating reality from the source.
The examples are delightfully mundane, actually, which is exactly why they work. For instance, making your morning coffee. The text suggests forcing an internal thought like, the aroma of these coffee beans is quite robust. I should grind them a bit finer tomorrow.
The aroma is quite robust. I mean, it's like you're narrating your life like a dramatic Victorian novelist, just staring intensely at your French press.
It is a bit theatrical, I admit. But another example they give is during a standard commute. Something like, the traffic seems unusually congested this morning. I should have anticipated this.
See, if I were stuck in traffic, my internal monologue would consist of far fewer syllables and far more expletives.
Fair enough.
But I see the mechanism here. You're forcing high-level C2 vocabulary onto low-stakes, mundane situations.
Yes. You are connecting the language directly to your lived experience. It's perpetual practice that doesn't require a conversation partner. And building on that internal monologue, the source highly recommends taking it a step further with a specific physical exercise. The 1-minute impromptu speech drill.
Okay, that sounds significantly more stressful than thinking about coffee.
It's designed to build neurological stamina. You choose any topic at random, mundane, or abstract, and you force yourself to speak on it entirely uninterrupted for 60 seconds out loud.
What happens when you inevitably freeze? Or when you, completely blank on a specific word?
That is the entire point of the exercise.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The objective is not eloquence or perfect grammar. The objective is flow. It trains your brain to keep the momentum going at all costs. If you forget a word, you do not stop and switch to your native language to translate.
You just keep pushing.
You employ circumlocution. You find a way to talk around the missing word using the vocabulary you do have access to.
You maintain the conversational momentum. You just keep pressing the jump button.
Exactly. And here is a crucial, non-negotiable detail from the text regarding these 1-minute drills.
All right.
You must record yourself while you do them.
Oh, man. I have to stop you there because listening to my own voice on a recording is pure, unadulterated agony. It's tough for everyone.
I think most people would agree it is one of the worst sounds in the world. Is the recording absolutely essential? Can I not just pace around my living room and talk out loud to my dog for a minute?
Well, while talking to your dog removes the pressure, it completely lacks an objective feedback loop. And biologically, that feedback loop is absolutely essential for neuroplasticity.
Okay, why?
The text makes a profound point here. Recording yourself forces you to confront and embrace imperfection. When you make an error, a slipped tense, a dropped article, a wrong preposition, you shouldn't view it as a failure of your ability.
How should we view it then?
As an invaluable data point. When you are in the flow state, trying desperately to keep talking for 60 seconds, your cognitive load is entirely focused on momentum.
Right, you're just trying to survive the minute.
Exactly. Your brain simply cannot monitor its own output accurately in real time. You will make mistakes you don't even realize you are making because your brain's error prediction mechanism is offline.
Recording yourself allows you to step back and act as your own diagnostician. When you listen back, you create a prediction error in the brain. You suddenly hear your own pacing issues, your pronunciation quirks, and those recurring grammatical snags that you completely missed in the heat of the moment.
So the error is just diagnostic data. It's your brain highlighting an area that needs more reinforcement rather than a reflection of your intelligence.
Precisely. It shifts the learner from a rigid, perfectionist mindset to a fluid, growth-oriented mindset. You hear the mistake,
right.
You isolate it, and you adjust the neural pathway for next time.
That reframing is incredibly useful. So to pull all of these threads together for you listening right now, the journey from passively understanding complex English to actively wielding it with spontaneous fluency requires a complete paradigm shift in how we approach the mechanics of the language.
It really does.
We have to abandon the pursuit of perfection from the outset because overthinking the syntax overloads our working memory and causes analysis paralysis. Instead of building sentences from scratch, we need to arm ourselves with lexical chunks, those prefabricated Lego blocks that automate the structure and free up our cognitive RAM.
And physically, we need to practice phonetic mirroring to capture not just the vocabulary, but the emotional music and rhythm of the language, locking it into our muscle memory.
All while embracing the messy reality of the 1-minute impromptu drills, recording our agonizing mistakes so we can use them as objective data points, and cultivating that internal Victorian novelist narrating our morning coffee.
The reason this matters so much is that, as the source points out, these aren't just quick tips or testing hacks. These are sustainable daily habits rooted in the science of neuroplasticity. Over time, these practices fundamentally reshape your neurological relationship with the language.
It stops being a sterile academic subject that you just decode in a textbook.
Exactly. It transforms into a living, breathing part of your identity. It's a cognitive leap, but in the text notes, it's a leap that every dedicated learner is entirely capable of making.
It is entirely within reach. We've spent this entire time talking about how consciously narrating our lives in a second language, doing these impromptu drills, forcing this internal monologue can physically rewire our brains for fluency. But looking at the broader implications of all this, it leaves you with a really fascinating thought to chew on.
What's that?
Well, if you start narrating your daily commute or your morning coffee in these highly descriptive, robust English terms instead of your native tongue, it makes you wonder, if the language we use shapes our thoughts, does changing your words actually change the way you perceive your own reality? Does adopting a completely new linguistic, music, and emotional rhythm fundamentally alter the person you are when you speak it?
That is a profound question to end on.
Something to mull over the next time you're brewing that robust cup of coffee. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one. Picture this. You are sitting right in the middle of a really high-stakes conversation.
Oh, I know this feeling already.
Right. Maybe it's a critical strategy meeting at work, or, perhaps it's just a deeply engaging dinner party with some incredibly sharp, well-read people.
The kind of environment where you really want to bring your A game.
Exactly. So the topic turns to something you are genuinely passionate about, something you understand on a profound structural level.
You know the material inside and out.
Inside and out. And inside your head, your thoughts are forming this beautifully complex web of nuance and historical context and sophisticated analysis.
Your internal monologue is just firing on all cylinders.
Exactly. Yeah. You know precisely what you want to say. So you take a breath, you open your mouth to deliver this devastatingly brilliant insight. And the words that actually come out sound, clunky.
Flat. Basic.
Right? You catch yourself relying on the exact same tired adjectives and simple sentence structures you've been leaning on for the last decade.
It's like your vocabulary just packed up and left.
Totally. You finish making your point, and this wave of quiet frustration washes over you because the version of you that just spoke does not match the intellectual horsepower of the version of you that exists inside your head.
It is a profoundly isolating feeling, honestly.
It really is. You feel like you've hit this invisible ceiling where your ability to communicate complex thought just abruptly stops.
The disconnect between your internal comprehension and your external output. It's the universal friction point. Anyone trying to master a skill feels it.
Right, but it feels especially punishing with language, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because you sit there analyzing your own sentence, thinking, I am objectively smarter than the words I just managed to string together.
Yes, I know bigger words than that.
Exactly. But the biological reality of this sensation, it completely reframes the problem. That feeling of being completely stuck, it is not a failure.
Wait, it's not?
No, not at all. It's not an indicator that you have reached the absolute limit of your intelligence. It is actually a highly predictable biological signal.
Okay, a biological signal telling you what exactly?
Your brain is generating that frustration to inform you that the training methods that got you to this current baseline, they are fundamentally insufficient to push you any further. You've outgrown your tools.
Oh, wow. So you haven't failed? You just need a new toolkit.
Precisely.
Well, if you are listening to this on your commute right now and feeling completely seen by that exact frustration, today's deep dive is engineered to shatter that invisible ceiling.
We're going to break it wide open.
Yes, we are. We are exploring the cognitive leaps required to move far beyond mere language fluency, where you simply survive a conversation without it collapsing and achieve what linguists call advanced articulacy.
True mastery of expression.
Right. And for this deep dive, we are unpacking insights from a session of the show, Pod Zone. Specifically, we're looking at an excerpt titled Beyond Fluency, The Path to Advanced Articulacy.
It's a fantastic piece of source material. It provides a really surgical breakdown of high-level linguistic training strategies.
It really does. And before we can fix the problem of feeling stuck, we have to diagnose exactly what is happening in the brain.
Right. What happens when we hit that notorious advanced plateau?
Because in language acquisition, there is a recognized trajectory.
Definitely. You power through the beginner stages where everything is brand new.
Right. You learn how to say hello and where's the bathroom.
Exactly. And then you experience this massive dopamine rush during the intermediate stages because you are rapidly absorbing conversational basics. You feel yourself progressing every day.
But then abruptly, the line flatlines.
The progress just stops. You continue putting in the exact same amount of effort, reading, listening, practicing, but the measurable progress drops to zero.
And the source material keeps referencing the goal here as speaking at a C2 level. I know that's a formal linguistic designation, but what does that actually mean in a practical sense?
Sure. So the C2 level comes from the CEFR. That's the common European framework of reference for languages. It's a scale that starts at A1, which is absolute beginner, and goes all the way up to C2, which signifies absolute mastery.
Got it. So where do most people get stuck?
Well, at A1 or A2, your brain's only goal is survival. You are desperately scanning for any recognizable word just to order a coffee.
Right, total panic mode.
Exactly. But by B1 or B2, the intermediate and upper intermediate stages, you have achieved fluency.
Meaning you can hold your own.
Yeah, you can comfortably navigate a debate or explain your job without panicking. But C2, that changes the fundamental mission of the brain.
Guess so.
C2 isn't about finding any word to survive the interaction. It is about finding the precise word to master the interaction.
The precise word, okay.
Right. It's the ability to express really subtle shades of meaning, to tailor your tone to a specific audience, and to effortlessly navigate complex, abstract topics.
So the advanced plateau is basically this agonizing gap between the B2 level of comfortable survival and the C2 level of absolute precision.
That is the exact chasm we were talking about.
And the source diagnoses the root cause of this plateau as a massive discrepancy between your passive vocabulary and your active vocabulary.
The sheer volume of that discrepancy is honestly what traps people.
Right. So think about your passive vocabulary as this massive, beautifully curated, multi-story library inside your brain.
I love this analogy.
It's great, right? When you read a dense piece of literature or, listen to a highly articulate speaker, you are wandering through this grand library.
You recognize thousands of titles on the spines.
Exactly. You understand an incredibly vast, nuanced lexicon. But your active vocabulary, the words you actually summon to your lips when you speak in real time, is not that grand library.
Not even close.
It's just the small stack of dog-eared, heavily worn paperbacks that you keep right on your nightstand.
Just a tiny fraction of what you actually know.
Right. You possess thousands of words in the passive library, but you restrict yourself to the same 50 paperbacks on the nightstand every single time you open your mouth.
You are carrying this immense wealth of linguistic potential, but you're operating under a self-imposed scarcity mindset during actual speech.
Why do we do that? It seems so counterproductive.
It comes down to the mechanics of cognitive load. That explains the biological necessity of this scarcity.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, real-time conversation is actually one of the most neurologically demanding tasks a human being can perform.
Wait, really? Just talking?
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. You are simultaneously decoding auditory signals, interpreting subtle facial micro-expressions, and formulating a logical response.
Okay, yeah, that is a lot happening at once.
And that's not all. You're also checking that response for grammatical accuracy and coordinating the motor functions of your vocal cords to physically produce the sound.
And all of this is happening in, fractions of a second?
Within a time frame measured in milliseconds.
Yeah.
The brain is maxing out its processing power just to keep the interaction alive.
So it's running at near capacity.
Exactly. And under that intense, immediate pressure, the human brain reverts to its default operating principle, which is cognitive economy.
Cognitive economy, meaning it's being lazy.
I wouldn't say lazy. The brain is a metabolic miser. It aggressively conserves energy by taking the path of least resistance.
So in that high-stakes meeting, when I want to sound brilliantly insightful, my brain evaluates the energy cost.
Right.
And it decides, we don't have the spare processing power or the milliseconds required to wander into the dusty library and locate that one perfect nuanced adjective.
Precisely. Your brain says, grab the dog-eared paperback off the nightstand. We know it works, and it's much faster.
That makes so much sense. I mean, it's frustrating, but it makes biological sense.
Retrieving a highly specific, rarely used word from the passive library actually requires a fraction of a second longer, and it demands slightly more metabolic energy than grabbing a high-frequency word.
Because we use the nightstand words all the time.
Right. Neurologically speaking, the neural pathways to your active vocabulary, those nightstand words are heavily myelinated.
Myelinated?
Yeah. Myelin is the insulating layer around nerves that allows electrical impulses to transmit quickly and efficiently.
Like insulation on a wire.
Exactly. So the words you use every day, they have thick, robust myelin sheaths. Those pathways are essentially high-speed fiber optic cables.
And the passive library words?
The pathways to the words in your passive library are unpaved dirt roads.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In a fast-paced dialogue, your brain flat out refuses to take the dirt road. It sacrifices articulacy for the sake of fluency just to ensure a continuous flow of speech.
So this means that continuing to consume more information, like reading another dense book or listening to another lecture, is totally useless if you are already on the plateau.
Completely useless for active speech, yes.
Because you are just buying more books and stuffing them onto the shelves of the dusty library. It does absolutely nothing to physically move those books onto the nightstand.
If anything, it exacerbates the frustration. You are actively widening the chasm between what you understand and what you can actually say.
Okay, so since the root issue is this gap between the dusty library and the nightstand, how do we practically move a word from one to the other?
This is where the source material pivots directly into a highly deliberate mechanical strategy. They term it the word of the day activation strategy.
Now, we need to differentiate this from the standard word of the day calendar that people have sitting on their desks, right?
Oh, absolutely. A standard calendar feeds you random, often archaic words you have never even seen before.
Right, words you would never actually use.
Exactly. Attempting to force a brand new, unrecognized word directly into your active vocabulary is a recipe for catastrophic failure in a real conversation.
Because you don't know how it works in context.
Right, you lack the intuitive context for how it behaves in a sentence. The prescribed strategy requires you to select a word that already exists securely within your passive library.
Okay, so a word I already know.
Yes. A word you instantly recognize when reading. A word whose definition you know perfectly, but a word you have never physically spoken in your life.
The source material leans on the word pernicious as their primary example here. Let's trace the mechanics of this.
It's a great example word.
So if I read a headline about, say, the pernicious effects of the new algorithm, my brain registers the meaning immediately.
Right. Highly injurious, destructive. Usually in a subtle, creeping, or gradual way.
Exactly. But I have literally never naturally deployed the word pernicious in a verbal exchange. Ever.
Most people haven't.
So to activate it, the source says, I can't just stare at it. I have to manufacture artificial scenarios to force its deployment throughout my day.
Because the activation requires physical, motor involvement.
Okay.
The very first step the source outlines is vocalizing the word in an isolated, low-stakes environment.
Like talking to myself.
Literally, yes. You construct a sentence and speak it aloud to an empty room. Like, the pernicious effects of social media isolation are well documented.
Okay, I have to stop you there. I am going to push back on this entirely.
Oh, why is that?
Because the source then says the ultimate goal is to force this word into a real-world conversation that same day.
That is the goal, yes.
But if I deliberately steer a discussion at a casual lunch just so I can artificially drop the word pernicious, I am going to sound incredibly pretentious.
You think so?
I really do. I am going to sound like a guy who swallowed a thesaurus trying to impress his colleagues. I mean, it violates the natural flow of human interaction.
It feels unnatural to you right now because you are conflating the training ground with the final performance.
What do you mean by that?
The lunch conversation where you awkwardly force the word pernicious into a sentence about, like, an Excel spreadsheet. That is not the end goal.
It's not, because it sounds terrible.
No, that conversation is merely the batting cage. The source relies on the psychological mechanics of a multimodal reinforcement loop.
Multimodal reinforcement loop. Okay, unpack that.
It means you write the word in a draft email, you speak it to an empty room, and yes, you force it into a slightly awkward lunch conversation.
So I have to accept the awkwardness.
Yes. Because you are attacking the neural pathway through multiple sensory modalities, tactile, auditory, and social.
But the social friction of sounding pretentious in that moment, it's massive.
Massive.
People can absolutely tell when you were reverse engineering a conversation, just to use a big word.
Sure, they might notice a slight hesitation the very first time you do it, but examine the underlying biology of what you are achieving here.
Okay, I'm listening.
Every single time you force the retrieval of that word, across those different modalities, you are laying down myelin on that unpaved dirt road.
You're paving the road.
Exactly. You are physically reducing the cognitive friction required to locate and deploy the word.
Okay, but why does it sound pretentious in the first place?
The reason someone sounds pretentious when they use a complex word is usually because the retrieval lacks fluency.
Oh, because they stumble over it.
Right. There's a micro pause, their eyes dart up, they emphasize the word way too heavily because they are secretly proud they remembered it.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. It's the verbal equivalent of stumbling over a root on a neglected hiking trail.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
The multimodal loop clears the brush off that trail.
So you trip over the roots during the first few awkward lunch conversations.
Yes, but by the 10th time you have utilized that pathway, the trail is fully paved. The retrieval becomes unconscious.
So it stops feeling forced.
Completely. When you reach the point where the word pernicious genuinely feels like the most efficient, accurate tool for the thought you were trying to express, you will no longer sound pretentious using it.
Because it's just another paperback on the nightstand.
Exactly. It will flow with the exact same cadence and natural rhythm as any other common word.
Okay, you sold me on the vocabulary aspect. But the structural application of this principle is where the source material gets even more demanding.
It does take it a step further.
Yeah, they argue that advanced articulacy isn't just about stockpiling a sophisticated vocabulary, right? It's about structural elegance.
Absolutely. Vocabulary provides the paint, but grammar provides the actual architecture of your thought.
And they extend this activation strategy to grammatical structures, specifically highlighting the past perfect continuous tense.
Right, the past perfect continuous. So that's describing an action that was ongoing in the past up until another point in the past.
It's a structure almost every intermediate speaker understands passively.
Definitely.
Like, I had been reviewing the quarterly data for 3 hours before the executive team arrived.
Exactly. When you hear that sentence, you instantly grasp the chronology. You feel the emphasis on the duration of that review process.
Right. It paints a very specific picture, and it is safely stored in your passive library.
But in the cognitive crucible of real-time speech, an intermediate speaker will almost universally abandon that complex structure.
Because of the cognitive load we talked about earlier.
Right. They will swap it out for a flatter, safer alternative. They will substitute it with the simple past.
Like, I reviewed the data for 3 hours and then the team arrived. And, I mean, the simple past gets the literal facts across. I survived the interaction, but it completely flattens the nuance.
It loses all the structural elegance. It completely misses the exhaustion of that 3-hour buildup before the arrival.
So to pull that grammatical structure onto the active nightstand, I have to run that identical multimodal loop.
Yes. You must engineer opportunities to use it. The source suggests narrating your own life internally using the target structure.
Just like walking around my house.
Literally.
Yeah.
You walk around your kitchen, deliberately formulating the syntax. Before the water boiled, I had been searching for the coffee filters.
Oh, that's interesting. So you are pre-assembling the scaffolding of complex thought in a zero-pressure environment.
Precisely. So that when the cognitive load of a real conversation spikes, your brain views that complex structure as a low-energy, familiar pathway.
Okay, this transition from narrating kitchen activities to internal thought, this brings up the most jarring insight in the entire deep dive for me.
The internal operating system upgrade.
Yes. The source makes the case that you cannot speak at a C2 level if you're still thinking at a B1 level.
It is a profound shift.
It really is. To achieve advanced external articulacy, you have to execute a total overhaul of your internal monologue. The voice in your head literally has to change.
Because the internal monologue is the baseline training ground for all external communication.
Right. And if we analyze the standard internal monologue of a functioning adult, it is highly, highly utilitarian.
It is entirely utilitarian.
Right. If I track my own internal monologue on a given Tuesday, it is basically just a running ledger of observations and low-level anxieties.
Right. Like, I need to get gas later.
Exactly. I need to reply to Sarah's email. The traffic on this street is getting worse. Oh, I forgot to take the chicken out of the freezer. It is basic low-level narration of the physical environment.
And that narrative style is perfectly adapted for surviving a Tuesday.
Sure, it keeps me alive.
But if your internal voice only ever practices simple observation, your neural pathways are only optimized for generating simple syntax.
So I'm trapping myself in B1.
Yes. The source argues that to reach that C2 plateau, your internal monologue must evolve from a passive observer into an active, dynamic debate simulator.
A debate simulator. Okay, the source text contrasts these two levels of thought by mapping out an internal reaction to reading an op-ed piece about a new tax policy.
Right. This is a brilliant comparison.
Let's break it down. So if you are operating on a B1 internal monologue, your brain processes the article like a basic word processor taking dictation.
It sounds something like, I am reading about the new tax plan. The author says taxes should be cut to help businesses. I am not sure if that is a good idea. It might hurt schools.
And I mean, the thoughts are valid.
They are valid, yeah.
But the linguistic architecture is incredibly brittle. The ideas are connected by nothing more than chronological sequence.
It's just this happened, then this happened. Contrast that with the cognitive sequencing required for the C2 level internal monologue they describe in the text.
Right. The C2 internal monologue reading the exact same tax article sounds like this. The author's underlying premise is that a reduction in the corporate tax rate will provide an immediate stimulus to localized economic growth. However, they completely fail to address the corollary impact on public infrastructure funding. I would contend that the long-term ramifications of underfunded public services could vastly outweigh the short-term, localized benefits of the initial tax cut.
I mean, just analyze the mechanics of what the brain is doing in that second scenario.
It's a completely different engine running.
It really is. The brain is not just recording the text, it is actively testing the structural integrity of the author's logic.
Right.
To formulate the thought, I would contend that the long-term ramifications, your brain is forced to retrieve abstract vocabulary.
Words like premise, corollary, ramification.
Exactly. And construct a complex conditional sentence structure all within the silent confines of your own head.
So you are running a high-fidelity simulation of an intellectual debate.
Yes. And crucially, there is no social pressure.
Right. If I lose my train of thought while debating the tax policy in my head while making coffee, there are absolutely no consequences.
None at all. But your neurons don't know it's a simulation.
Oh, wow.
You are actively forcing the myelination of the exact pathways required for sophisticated discourse.
So when you eventually find yourself at that dinner party we talked about, and the topic of municipal tax policy is raised,
you do not have to build a complex argument from scratch while 6 people stare at you.
because the heavy lifting has already been completed.
Exactly. The conceptual framework is organized, the transition phrases are preloaded on your active nightstand, and the argument flows with a fluency that appears completely spontaneous to everyone else in the room.
They just think you are a genius on the spot.
Right, but it's really just the result of internal rehearsal.
Okay, but wait, if that's true, then there is a glaring dependency here.
What's that?
If I am supposed to run a high-powered debate simulator in my head, where am I getting the raw materials to debate in the first place? Because I can't generate the word ramifications internally if my external environment only ever feeds me basic vocabulary.
You have identified the exact principle that the Thorst refers to as the diet of articulacy.
The diet of articulacy, I like that.
The quality of the language you are biologically capable of producing is strictly capped by the quality of the language you consistently consume.
So garbage in, garbage out.
Essentially, yes. If your goal is a C2 mastery output, you are required to ruthlessly curate your input. You must immerse yourself in C2 level material.
And the source is militant about this.
Very militant.
They explicitly instruct the reader to abandon generic mass-market daily news apps, which, I mean, that's what most of us read on our phones every morning.
Right, it's the default. But they recommend academic lectures from university scholars instead.
And programs like the BBC's Hard Talk.
Yes, which is famous for its combative, really dense interviewing style.
They also push highbrow, long-form journalism from outlets like The Atlantic or The Economist.
And they advocate heavily for dense literary fiction, which introduces a completely different structural rhythm than nonfiction.
Okay, I need to dig into the structural difference here, because a skeptic might look at this diet and say, news is news.
Right. Facts are facts.
Exactly. If I read a 200-word bulleted summary of a geopolitical event on my phone, I get the exact same factual information as the person reading a 4,000-word essay on the same event in The Economist.
It's true. You get the same base facts.
Right. So why does the source insist the bulleted summary is completely useless for articulacy?
Because the bulleted summary transfers facts, but it strips away the entire architecture of language required to actually analyze those facts.
Okay.
Mass market news is engineered for maximum speed and frictionless mass comprehension.
It's meant to be read in like 30 seconds.
Right, so it relies almost exclusively on active voice, basic subject, verb, object, sentence structures, and a highly restricted high-frequency vocabulary. It is designed to be consumed rapidly and discarded.
So it is optimized for the B1 reader.
Precisely. But outlets like The Atlantic or The Economist, they are engineered to push the boundaries of linguistic capability.
They aren't just giving you the facts.
Right. The writers are not merely reporting a sequence of events. They are analyzing the subtle, interconnected implications of those events.
And to convey that level of conceptual nuance, the language itself must become incredibly sophisticated.
Exactly. You simply can't capture geopolitical nuance with a basic subject, verb, object sentence.
You need extended metaphors.
You need deeply embedded clauses that hold multiple contrasting ideas in suspension within a single paragraph.
Wow, yeah.
You need a vocabulary that is incredibly rich with idiomatic density. When you consume this caliber of material, you're doing much more than learning facts.
What else is happening?
Your brain is subconsciously mapping the cadence, the structural rhythm, and the grammatical blueprints of highly articulate thought.
Okay, but we are falling into a trap here.
How so?
If I take the source's advice right, and I spend an hour every morning drinking coffee, and reading an incredibly dense, beautifully structured essay in The Atlantic.
Sounds like a lovely morning.
It does. But if I am just absorbing it passively, haven't we just circled all the way back to the problem in section 1? Yeah. I mean, I am just buying more expensive books and putting them in the dusty, passive library.
You are exactly right. Passive consumption of complex material is an illusion of progress.
Because it feels like work.
It feels like intellectual work because your brain successfully decoded the complex syntax. But you have done zero mechanical work to move those structures to your active nightstand.
Okay, so how do we fix that?
To extract the usable value from C2 input, the source mandates the strict implementation of an input-output feedback loop.
An input-output feedback loop. So the rule is that consumption must be immediately followed by forced production. Let's map this onto a real scenario. Say I just spent 50 minutes listening to an intensely academic podcast dissecting, I don't know, the socioeconomic impacts of artificial intelligence.
Okay, heavy topic.
Very heavy. The episode wraps up. I take my headphones out. Under this new training regimen, I don't just move on with my day and start making lunch.
No, absolutely not. The moment the input ceases, you must impose a pause.
Okay.
You sit in silence.
Yeah.
And you literally force your brain to generate an immediate output based on the architecture you just absorbed.
Generating what exactly?
The baseline requirement of the exercise is to verbally summarize the core thesis of that 50-minute lecture. Speaking aloud to yourself, condensing it into a highly structured 2-minute monologue.
Okay, that sounds cognitively exhausting.
It is extremely demanding.
Because taking a sprawling, multi-layered hour of content and violently compressing it into a coherent 2-minute verbal summary that requires you to instantly locate and deploy the exact high-level vocabulary the lecturer was using.
Yes. And the cognitive exhaustion you feel, that is the actual mechanism of growth. But the source text elevates the difficulty even further.
Wait, further than that?
Yes, because summarization demonstrates comprehension, but formulating a counter-argument demonstrates true mastery.
Oh, wow. So after listening to the AI lecture, your task is to identify the speaker's primary underlying assumption and then systematically construct a logical verbal argument against it.
Right, using the sophisticated syntax you just mapped from their speech.
Okay, why is this forced immediate verbalization considered the ultimate stress test for the brain?
Because it forces a neurological bridge between comprehension and production in real time.
Let's break those steps down.
Sure. First, your working memory has to hold the complex ideas you just heard. Second, your executive function has to synthesize those ideas and reorganize them into an opposing conceptual framework.
Which is hard enough to do in writing.
Exactly. And third, your motor cortex has to physically command your vocal cords to reproduce the advanced vocabulary required to articulate that new framework out loud.
You are physically forcing the words out of the passive library, dragging them across the chasm, and slamming them onto the active nightstand.
Yes. All while the neural pathways are still warm from the input.
That is incredible. And this active grappling with high-level text is where the source material introduces the final and arguably most important concept of the entire deep dive.
Which is the nuance of connotation.
Right, connotations.
Connotation is the absolute dividing line between someone who is merely fluent and someone who is a true master of articulacy.
Let's make sure we define the terms here. A dictionary gives you the literal denotation of a word, right? The raw, factual definition.
Right, the base meaning.
But connotation is the emotional baggage, the historical weight, and the subtle unspoken flavor that the word carries with it.
Exactly. When a speaker is stuck on the advanced plateau, they tend to view synonyms as perfectly interchangeable puzzle pieces.
It's like a word is just a word.
Right. If they need an adjective that means refusing to change, they reach into the active nightstand and grab the single word they always use, completely ignoring the contextual flavor required.
But an articulate speaker understands that no two words in the English language are ever perfectly interchangeable.
Never. There is always a subtle difference.
And the source provides a brilliant masterclass on this exact concept, using 4 adjectives that share the identical core definition of refusing to give up or change course.
This is my favorite part of the text.
It's so good. The words are persistent, stubborn, tenacious, and obstinate.
4 very common words.
Right. And if you run those 4 words through a basic translation app, they might all spit out the exact same word in another language.
Because the denotation is identical. but the connotative differences between them dictate entirely different realities.
Okay, let's apply these 4 words to a high-stakes workplace scenario to really map the blast radius of connotation.
I love the term blast radius for this.
It really fits. So imagine I am a director writing a formal performance review for a project manager, and this manager absolutely refuses to let go of an initiative, even when they hit massive logistical roadblocks.
Okay, got the picture.
The literal physical behavior of the employee is identical in all 4 scenarios. But watch how the single word I select for my active vocabulary completely changes their career trajectory. Let's start with tenacious.
Okay, so if you encode that behavior with the word tenacious, you are bestowing a massive professional compliment.
Right, sounds very positive.
Extremely positive. The connotation of tenacious implies a heroic, deeply admirable grip on a goal. It suggests resilience in the face of noble adversity.
So by formally declaring the employee tenacious,
You are signaling to executive leadership that this person possesses the grit required for a promotion.
okay, what if my brain reaches for a slightly different word and I write that the employee is persistent?
Persistent shifts the emotional weight toward neutral, perhaps slightly positive.
It feels a little flatter.
It does. It lacks the heroic fire of tenacious. It simply denotes a mechanical continuation of effort. A persistent employee is reliable and hardworking, but perhaps a bit unimaginative.
They keep knocking on the door, but they aren't necessarily celebrated for it.
Exactly. They're just doing their job repeatedly.
Okay, now we cross the linguistic boundary into negative territory. What if I write in the official review that the project manager is stubborn?
You have just raised a severe red flag.
Really? Just with stubborn?
Absolutely. The connotation of stubborn implies an unreasonable, inflexible refusal to alter course, usually driven by ego or intellectual blindness.
Oh, wow.
By using stubborn, you are actively warning leadership that this employee is difficult to manage, ignores constructive feedback, and prioritizes their own way over the optimal way.
That is a harsh review. And finally, the nuclear option. What if I describe the exact same behavior, but I pull the word obstinate from my vocabulary?
If you deploy the word obstinate, you are escalating the behavior into a full-blown crisis.
It sounds so formal and heavy.
It is heavy. Obstinate carries a connotation of deliberate, aggressive defiance against reason or authority. It is a deeply negative character judgment.
You are not just criticizing your workflow anymore.
No, you are questioning their insubordination. Using obstinate practically triggers a mandatory HR intervention.
That is wild. The physical reality of a person refusing to drop a project never changed at all.
Not one bit.
But the blast radius of the word choice swung wildly from an executive promotion to an HR intervention, purely based on the subtle connotative flavor of the adjective.
That is the immense power of true articulacy.
And this level of supreme discernment, it does not generate organically from memorizing flashcards.
No, you can't learn that nuance from a flashcard app. You only develop the instinct for whether to deploy tenacious or obstinate in a split-second boardroom conversation through the deliberate analysis of C2-level input.
Right. So when you are reading The Economist and the author describes a politician as obstinate, you have to run the internal simulation.
Exactly. You have to pause and ask your brain, wait, why did the author reject stubborn in this sentence? What specific venomous flavor does obstinate inject into this paragraph?
That constant hyper-analytical engagement with language is what builds the bridge to the nightstand.
It really is.
So we need to synthesize this entire roadmap for the listener before we wrap up. We started with the very real, visceral frustration of feeling trapped on the advanced plateau, feeling like our external output betrays our internal intelligence.
A feeling we all know too well.
Right. So what is the fundamental shift required to break through?
The core thesis of the source material demands that you ruthlessly close the loop between your passive comprehension and your active production.
You can't just be a passive consumer anymore.
No, you must abandon the hope that passive consumption will eventually just naturally result in active articulacy. It won't.
You have to do the work.
You have to perform the mechanical labor of activation. You have to engineer those multimodal loops to force specific words onto your nightstand. You must upgrade your internal monologue from a passive narrator to an active debate simulator.
Because articulacy is the conscious shift from communicating a raw, naked idea
to communicating that exact idea with surgical precision and calculated emotional impact.
I think the vital takeaway from this deep dive is the profound reframing of the plateau itself.
Oh, absolutely.
It is so easy to view the plateau as a wall, like a sign of intellectual failure. But this framework completely dismantles that anxiety.
The plateau is not a wall.
No, it is simply a biological checkpoint confirming that you have successfully completed the foundational phase of your linguistic training.
You have built a magnificent library.
Right. The mission has simply changed. You no longer need to build a bigger library. You just need to start hauling the books to the nightstand.
It is a highly encouraging shift, really, going from foundational construction to elite fine-tuning.
It is incredibly empowering.
It is. And, I want to leave the listener with a final, slightly provocative concept to consider as they go about their day.
Oh, I love a provocative thought. Let's hear it.
Throughout this entire deep dive, we've been examining these strategies: the word-of-the-day activation, the internal debate, the forced output loops, primarily through the implicit framework of mastering a second or a third language.
Right, because that is where we usually encounter the formal concepts of fluency plateaus and CEFR levels like B1 or C2.
Exactly. But I want you to consider the application of these exact mechanics to your native language.
Oh,
Language you have been speaking since you were 2 years old.
that is a fascinating shift in perspective.
Think about the mechanics of native fluency. Most of us achieve functional conversational fluency in our mother tongue by the time we hit early adolescence.
Right, we can talk to anyone about mostly anything.
And then for the most part, we just coast.
We do coast.
We completely cease any deliberate mechanical expansion of our active toolkit. We read complex books, our passive library grows immensely, but our active nightstand remains relatively stagnant for decades.
So the question is, are you currently sitting on a massive, unrecognized plateau in your native language?
Honestly, most of us absolutely are. We rely on the exact same B2 level conversational toolkit at age 40 that we used at age 20.
I feel personally attacked by how true that is.
Right. So what would happen if you subjected your mother tongue to this exact regimen?
That is such a compelling question.
What if you started engineering daily opportunities to deploy precise, highly nuanced vocabulary words that you've only ever read in your native language?
What if you actively forced your internal monologue to rigorously debate the architectural flaws of a complex policy, rather than just internally narrating your commute to work?
What if you applied the input-output loop to summarize and counter-argue every dense article you read in English?
You would fundamentally reconstruct the way you interface with the world.
You would radically elevate your articulacy. And by extension, you would completely alter the way you are perceived, the way your ideas are respected, and the gravity with which you are listened to in your own native language.
Because the truth is, the beautifully curated, heavily stocked library already exists inside your head.
It's already there.
The staggering nuance, the brilliant arguments, the complex architecture of thought, it is all already in there, waiting in the stacks.
The only barrier standing between the silent brilliance inside your mind and the impact you want to exert on the room around you
is the willingness to do the mechanical work of moving the books to the nightstand.
Exactly.
So the next time you are in that high-stakes conversation and you feel that invisible ceiling pressing down, restricting your words, recognize the signal.
It is not a limit on your capability.
No, it is just your brain telling you it is time to change the training regimen. It is time to take deliberate mechanical control of the words before the words take control of you.